Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tom Kalil from the White House, and we're going to have a Google Hangout on the Maker Movement. What is the Maker Movement, and why is it important, and how can it advance important national goals like getting more young boys and girls excited about STEM education and promoting manufacturing? And we're going to kick things off by having the participants briefly introduce themselves and talk about their connection to the Maker Movement. And we're going to start with Tara. Tara.
Hello, live from Rainy, Costa Rica. I'm the co-founder and director of LA Makerspace in what I think is sunny Los Angeles, California.
Great. And super awesome Sylvia is next.
Hello, my name is Sylvia. I make a web show on YouTube on how to make stuff, and this is my dad, James.
Hi.
And Saul Griffith.
Hi, Saul Griffith, founder of Other Lab, an engineering and science firm in not quite as sunny San Francisco, California.
Great. And Prasad.
I'm Venkatesh Prasad with Ford Motor Company. I'm based normally in two places, Dearborn, Michigan and Palo Alto, California, and I've been part of trying to get cars to open up. Great.
And Dale Doherty.
Yes, hi, I'm Dale Doherty, and I'm in San Francisco today, but from Sebastopol, California. I'm founder of Make Magazine and Maker Faire.
Hi, Dale.
Okay.
Hi, Prasad.
So Dale, one question I have for you is for those of our viewers who are new to the Maker Movement, how would you describe it for someone who has never heard of it or never read a copy of Make Magazine or been to a Maker Faire?
Well, I think at a kind of basic level, it's about creating and making and doing things and understanding sort of the tools and the materials and the people that allow us to do these things. And in simple ways, it's like getting control of the ability to change the world around you physically and even mentally, thinking through this. So people think of making in lots of different ways. Some think of making as working with electronics, and some of them think of it with 3D printing. But there's also people who think of it in terms of knitting and crafting, and food, and hobbies like RC cars. So I think it's something that has always, in a sense, been a part of our culture, but it has come back, I think, today in a different framing, that we want to see ourselves as creative and makers and producers, not just sort of consumers of things.
Great. And recently you launched something called the Maker Education Initiative with the goal of trying to make every child a maker. So Dale, I'm wondering if you can say a word or two about what the goals of that initiative are.
Yes. Well, every year we see all these kids come to Maker Faire, and they see other makers, and I know in our heart they walk away saying, how do I become a maker? How do I get started? And if they go to school, they may or may not find that happening. If they go to a community center, they may or may not find people there or the environment there to do that. And they may or may not find it at home. So how could we get making into our community in all of those areas so that we can engage kids as makers? And I think the purpose of the nonprofit Maker Education Initiative is to look at what are the kinds of models that we can build that other community youth-serving organizations can follow to work with kids. So it might be museums and science centers and after-school programs and schools themselves. I think one of the things we are launching this summer is Maker Core, which is training young people, young makers, to work with kids in their own communities. And there's over 35 host sites in the country that will host young makers and bring in makers from young people from the community to learn how to make.
Great. So Prasad, recently Ford created a partnership with an organization called Tech Shop. I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about that partnership and why Ford decided to do that, and what are some of the things that are coming out of that partnership?
Yeah, I think it's really nice to to really have Saul here and Dale here, and really many of us have been to, and Dale's the creator of Maker Faire, as all of us know. It was at Maker Faire that we ran into Jim Newton, who had seeded the growth of Tech Shop and founded it, and Mark Hatch, who runs the operations and is the CEO. But we were really looking at saying what was the best way by which we could provide our employees within sort of the large organizational structure that we have, a way of having fun, a way of doing things that perhaps may not be part of their normal jobs in an approved sort of process sense, but might be a way to get them some mental exercise and maybe even some exercise in a physical sense of using their hands and doing and building things. And so we were sort of thinking through this, but it so happened that that year, 2010, we were at Maker Faire with a hacked and modified car. Dale, you might remember that. And as we were there, we ran into Mark and Jim, and we decided that it might be a really good way to bring our sort of processes and capabilities together. They were sort of an interesting complementary offerings. And while I was thinking about that, I went back to Dearborn, and my colleague there, who runs all of Ford's intellectual property business, normally his job is to lock down things and protect them, but he was thinking outside in and saying, well, how can we actually get tools and processes from the outside to really be working with employees as a way of, more or less along the same lines that I've been thinking about, and about getting employees to sort of build things on their own and open up, and that's how it came to be. And he was trying to reach Tech Shop because he'd read about the Tech Shop in the New York Times. There'd been a pretty nice article on Tech Shop, and then we connected and reached out to Jim Newton and Mark Hatch, and then we decided to sort of make this. Obviously, this is fun, it's great to do, but it has to be cast in an affordable and a sustainable sort of business framework. And so we decided to come together to sort of make some investments and offered an attractive physical plant near our operations in Dearborn, Michigan. And then we started giving employee incentives that were really around saying, if you were an innovator in some sense, where your ideas had been translated to product value propositions, or if you were busy inventing and getting things down a pipeline and had a certain number of, could have been patent filings, or could have been just working collaboratively to get things done, then you would get a discounted, or in some cases, a free membership. That then got a whole lot of interest. And so it's been a real success, not without challenges that any organization might have, but I think it's been a really good way for us to get the outside in and for us to go out.
Great. Okay. And for our viewers that might not be familiar with open innovation as a business strategy, could you say a little bit about that and why Ford is pursuing that?
Yeah, I think it's a very firm commitment that's been made at the very highest level of our leadership operations, and it couldn't have been done otherwise. And so at a very fundamental level, it's about unleashing the best within the firm and then really looking at novel ways to work with interesting folks on the outside. All of this sounds like something we probably all are doing, but I don't think this happens very often. And so what we've found is we've created toolkits. We need toolkits to be able to make these things, these interactions, useful. And so we've created this open source hardware and open source software toolkit called OpenXC. It's a platform that allows a lot of employees to work with other employees to make product improvements, to have quality improvements. That's already well underway. And then we take that toolkit and make it as a sort of an offering to the community of developers, of users outside of the company, and that then allows ideas to take root in the form of actual experimentation with cars or data from cars. And so that's begun to happen. So open innovation really is a way by which you can get outside ideas in and have inside ideas sort of permeate outside, but really on a meaningful business, social engagement, and technology platform.
Right. So one nice summary that I've heard of this idea comes from Bill Joy, who said, no matter who you are, most of the smartest people in the world work for someone else. And I think this open innovation approach recognizes that.
Tom, there's actually a follow-up to Bill Joyce's great statement, and that is the challenge is you don't know where those somebody else are, where they are, who they are.
Right. Right. So Saul, tell us what are some of the things that you're working on at Other Lab, and tell us what Other Lab is.
So Other Lab is an independent R&D house. So we develop new technologies. At the moment, we are enjoying developing low-cost CNC machines to hopefully propel the maker movement by enabling more people to have access to computer-controlled tools. We also work in interesting aspects of robotics and solar energy.
Great. And what are some of the tools that you're working on that could democratize making? You know, if you think about one of the reasons that we've seen so much innovation in internet and software is that the barriers to entry are really low. So you can have a small team living on ramen noodles for a couple months, and for a very low amount of money, they can, you know, develop a new smartphone application or a new online service. Do you see similar opportunities in the area of actually making stuff as opposed to digital innovation?
Absolutely, and maybe to contextualize that, you know, I think we've had a few maker movements in history before. We had sort of the crafts revival of the turn of the last century, driven by William Morris, and then I think Tom Wolfe wrote the fabulous essay "Tangerine Colored Cornflake Baby," and we had the whole hot rodding culture of the 1950s, which still influences Detroit and the automotive industry today, and that was a maker-led movement, very democratic, that hot rodding of cars. So I do think we're having a nice new maker movement now, and I think it's an interesting thing. So what is different now, and how do we make more of those good different things happen? And the real difference is connectivity and the internet and the sharing of ideas more easily. And I think the really unique aspect is because we now have much cheaper computer-controlled machine tools, you can send people the descriptions for three-dimensional objects and have them made in other locations. So we've really sped up the speed at which we can share ideas and share physical objects. The 3D printing revolution, which is getting a lot of very well-deserved press, is sort of the lead of that. But really what's underlying it all is the incredible drop in cost in the past 5 years of using a computer to control a machine. So it used to be $1,000 to $2,000 for the hardware to drive a CNC machine. It's now $50 or $100. And the beautiful thing about this is we're going to see a whole flowering of CNC machines that are cheap enough for schools, for parents to afford. And so you'll be able to have kids in New York collaborating with kids in LA, building objects and replicating each other's objects and mashing up their objects. So we'll see something happening with physical objects that we saw happen with music in the 1990s in terms of mixing and mashing up. I think that's hugely exciting. Just, you know, the other technologies that are coming online that I think really influence this are just much better software. So finally, 3D software tools are getting a lot of attention. Autodesk is doing a great job of leading a lot of that work. We do some of that work here at Other Lab. There's, you know, in your internet browser, you can now design electronic circuits at circuits.io or upverter.com. They're fabulously democratizing design tools for this movement. There's much better collaboration and sharing tools like Instructables.com and even in the knitting space, places like Ravelry.com. So sharing your ideas and tools is a really big thing. And then definitely two important pieces of new technology that are influencing this are the marketplaces, so the Etsy's and the Pinocchos and the Shapeways that help people, once they've made things, sell them and actually build real businesses. And then the crowdfunding sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter are a fabulous technology. Those last two are social technologies, but they're really, in some respects, the fuel, the social fuel for this movement. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in the space, and I think it's a wonderful, exciting time to get involved.
Great. And what are a couple of examples of things, manufactured goods that have primarily moved offshore that we might have the ability to start making again in the United States?
There's no reason to believe we can't bring back a lot of furniture making, a lot of clothing. Pretty much everything is back in sights of being possible to be made in America, and it will be through a lot of automation. So lower cost robotics, the type of things that Rodney Brooks is doing with Heartland Robotics, and cheaper robots and cheaper CNC means we're going to be able to automate a lot of processes and low-cost labor that we sent offshore in the past 20 years. I think that's very exciting. So I can imagine we will see a lot of bespoke and small-scale local furniture companies, bicycle manufacturers, even automotive companies like Local Motors that are able, through this type of automation, to sort of meet Asia where it is in terms of labor cost.
Great. All right. Super awesome, Sylvia. You already have a lot of new fans in the White House. Can you tell us about your TV show and what are some of your favorite projects?
Well, I make a web show on YouTube, and I show people how to make stuff, simple as no heat lava lamps and to rockets. I think my favorite project...
And Arduino.
Oh, and Arduino. And my favorite project right now is the watercolor bot, which is painting over there.
Yes, it has its own Hangout video stream where it's currently painting the White House logo.
Oh, that's great.
That's a fun little project that, how long have you been working on that?
About 3 weeks. 3 weeks I've been working on it, and I've put a lot of hard work and effort into it with help of a business called EMSL, EvilMab Science Laboratories. They helped me a lot. They had a lot of tools that I could use, which I don't have here.
That's great. And what's the favorite message that you've gotten from one of your fans about a project that they're working on, or just something they told you?
Well, here's the quote. This little family from Sweden says, "Thank you, super awesome Sylvia and super mysterious dad." Here in Sweden, Ella, Liam, and I really like your maker show. You know so much, and we're learning a lot from you. Thank you, super awesome Sylvia and super mysterious dad.
That's great.
Yeah, and we get emails like that all the time from all over the world about people who feel strongly about this. Having so she started when she was 8, and now she's 11, and we've been just keep doing it. Although we haven't been making as many shows lately, we've been going to places and visiting maker fairs all over the country, and really getting to actually meet with people.
Great.
I do get a lot more like messages from fans outside of the web, like Maker Faire, and like kids say, "Oh, it's Sylvia, hi!" and they're all excited.
That's great. And Sylvia, how did you first get interested in this?
Well, I got interested into making and into the maker movement when I went to Maker Faire. I got very inspired, and there was a lot of amazing, cool things. And so did my dad. He thought this is really cool, and he'd like me and my siblings to get into it.
I saw Maker Faire back at the very first one back in 2006, and I walked around with my then 5-year-old Sylvia, and I said, I have no excuse. I can't be the dad that doesn't get into this. I don't want my kids left behind. I don't want them to be swept away by me not giving excuses. So I wanted to be kind of a dad that wanted to help out. So I introduced them to it, and then she kind of grabbed onto it and didn't want to let go.
That's great. Okay.
That is great.
Well, Tara, you've been working in LA to make more makers. So tell me what motivated you to create a family-friendly makerspace, and what are you and your colleagues doing to create that?
Well, it was a few different things. When I first moved to LA, I really wanted to connect with other women that were into tech like myself. And then after I had my son, expanded into kids. And around that time, my husband had started a hackerspace in LA, but it was adults only. And so I thought, there has to be other families like ours that, wants a space for, themselves and their kids to hang out and make stuff and connect with others that have similar interests. And so I basically wrote a blog post, and 25 of us showed up at Crash Space, which is the hacker space that my husband co-founded. And after that, we just started meeting and planning, and we started putting on different events that ranged from, learning how to program to liquid nitrogen ice cream socials to, I think we did like a big Halloween DIY event. And eventually, just out of, persistence, we ended up finding a space in downtown LA. And we officially opened on February 2nd. We had a robot party, and a couple hundred people showed up. And we actually started it all through a Kickstarter. That was where we got our initial seed funding so that we could purchase a few things, including, laser cutter and 3D printer. And, we've had a bunch of woodworking tools and other materials donated to us. And just, people show up on Saturdays and Sundays to take classes or just to work on the projects that they're continuing after they've learned how to start them at some of our classes. So it's been really busy and really fun and exciting. And we just, we're going to keep going.
Mm-hmm. And what are your hopes and dreams for 2013?
Oh, there's so many. Well, for me, I'm really into everything space. And so I'm hoping that we get to visit JPL and SpaceX and XCOR and Virgin Galactica this year. So that's some of my goals, in addition to making things based on mentors that we hope to grab as we visit all these different organizations. And we really want to form a lot of groups at this space based on their similar interests. And so we have a group that's all about, they call themselves the evil geniuses, and they're building some destructo robots and stuff. We have a citizen science group. So really people are sort of forming their groups based on their interests, and I want to see more and more of that. And also people really starting to work on projects as opposed to coming into the space to, take classes. And so I'd like to see more of that happening. And I think the other thing is I really want to form a network. Really been informal to date with museums and libraries, schools. And so I'd like to see that formalized more so we can share resources.
That's great. Your comment about SpaceX reminds me of something else that I'm working on, which is the whole idea of grand challenges, which are these really ambitious goals like sequencing the human genome, and a bunch of companies are thinking about these as well. So Qualcomm is supporting a large incentive prize for a tricorder, so a mobile device that could diagnose 10 diseases, and Google's working on a self-driving car that could reduce traffic fatalities by at least 50%, which grows out of an earlier DARPA grand challenge. And Elon Musk, who's the CEO of SpaceX, has a very modest goal, which is to make humanity a multi-planetary species. And as he puts it, I want to die on Mars, but not on impact. So, I think one of the things that the maker movement can do is, as Dale said, encourage people to think about the dent that they want to make in the universe.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, one of the things that, if I might jump in, is that I think Tara represents is just how much of the activity in the maker movement is self-organizing groups of people coming together, figuring out there's a need and an opportunity to create a space, maker spaces, hacker spaces, and even things like school clubs and after-school programs. So much of it is just an individual taking the initiative to do this. And kind of like what Tara said, I think there's an opportunity that we're all looking at is how do we connect all these individual initiatives together so people are learning from each other. And in effect, they know they're not alone doing this and multiply its impact. But it's a lot of the maker fairs are organized by a person in that community getting out there and saying, I can find the makers, I can get a space, and we can have this event, and the spaces are happening in the same way. So it is part of the DIY ethic of I think the whole movement of just you can do it, and I think it's a wonderful part.
That's great. And Dale, I know you've been doing some work to try to create some kind of organizing guides for different communities that are thinking about creating, a mini maker fair or something like that in their community.
Yeah. Well, we came up with the idea of one of the ways to help spread this around initially when we realized we couldn't organize all the maker fairs that wanted to happen, that we came up with the idea of playbooks. So what did we know about making that we could share, making a maker fair that we could share with other people? And for instance, a lot of it's organizing your community and figuring out how to get out there and meet people and defining a common goal and lots of participation. But we've also done that with young makers as a small club model. We wrote a playbook for that on youngmakers.org, and then on makerspace.com there's a playbook for starting a makerspace in sort of like a school and a library. And I find that a lot of people need practical guidance in how to they get what they want to do, but sort of like, well, do we have to have all the features, or can we just start, as Tara was describing, with a few tools and a core group of people that want to make it happen? And the answer is yes. Things start to build some momentum, and tools show up, people show up, and others want to help.
Great. So one question that I want to ask everyone is, a lot of times President Obama talks about we need an all-hands-on-deck effort. And it's not going to be any one individual or organization, but there's lots of different ways in which different types of individuals and organizations and communities can participate in spreading the maker movement to give more kids and adults an opportunity to get involved and to promote innovation in manufacturing in the same way that the US computer industry grew out of things like the Homebrew Computer Club. So I'm wondering whether people have any reflections on, if you could issue a call to action to companies and libraries and museums and volunteers and, even, the federal government agencies like the National Science Foundation or the Department of Education. What are some of the specific things that you think individuals and organizations can do right now to help elevate making and promote the type of innovation and entrepreneurship that Saul was talking about? So Dale, any thoughts?
Well, I guess on a general level, one is just to sort of figure out, going back to your Bill Joy comment, is, as a country, we have such capacity, and it's not always, the talent is not always, in, say, an academic setting or a corporate setting. It's out in the wild. Right. And yet it doesn't have to, it could benefit from the connections into a business. And I think one of the maybe transitions that I see us going from is from like a DIY mentality where I can do it myself to really solving more complex problems and doing things at a greater scale that involve intense collaboration with greater numbers of people. And those are people in businesses, those are people in academia, and how do we create interfaces to find the expert on that material, or that expert who understands a manufacturing process, who may have a day job doing something but wouldn't mind contributing, just in the way that the open source community often pulls its expertise from lots of different sources, and they work across boundaries and borders. And I think we need more of that happening in the maker community. I keep thinking that if makers had better access to some of the manufacturing capacity in this country, they could really do things here. But it's a capacity that sometimes is difficult to interface with. Like, you have to get on the phone and talk to someone who may not want to take your call. So, because you look like a small scale opportunity. But I think that sort of increasing opportunity for collaboration is one of the big things. And I think makers also have a role of doing a better job of telling others about what they're doing. Sometimes the hacker spaces have wonderful, wonderful projects inside of them, but no one knows unless you walk inside. So, we have to kind of just share more openly and broadly. And I think companies can I've had companies ask, like, we want our engineers to be makers. And I think what they mean by that is really the mindset around they do make in their job,
Yeah.
but it's sort of how do they think creatively and innovatively, and how do they, in a sense, within that organization get a yes to go on and do creative things, and perhaps outside of that company find something in the community that also takes advantage of their knowledge and expertise.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Prasad, what thoughts do you have about what kind of call to action you would issue to companies or volunteers or other organizations?
I think it's there's been a lot of learning that I've had, and I think a lot of the learnings translate well across large industrial sectors. It doesn't really have to be within the automotive sector at all. Really, what I represent is the unleashing through relevant open source technologies, whether it's software or hardware or some combination, or it's just even open access to otherwise highly locked down sort of institutions and products and services. So the real call is identify within your business, what makes sense to create attractive platforms so you can really get the makers, the third-party developers to come and add value to your platform. Your platform has to be interesting, and the barriers to innovating on your platform has to be really low. And then you start discovering the 3D printer user operator down the street who might then modify your product. You might then find someone who adds a new sort of electronic or software-enabled service to that product. And it could be in really across all sectors.
Right. So in the same way that, we have all these third-party developers creating apps for smartphones, you could see that happening in traditional industrial sectors like cars. So cars could become a platform.
Right, and it's not just apps in the software sense. I like to use the word apps in the hardware applications.
Right. Great. Saul, what do you think we need to do next as a country to make the most of these new opportunities that you were talking about, from low-cost CNC machine tools to the internet as a platform for distributing know-how and CAD files to crowdfunding and all the other cool things that you're working on?
I love your question. You're going to have to stop me probably some midway through all of the wonderful things we could do. I think I'd like to emphasize here what I believe is at the core, what is addictive about making, is that it really expresses that every one of us has the capacity to design and build a better world locally around us and globally. So it's not a passive type of consumerism that we've had for quite a long time globally. It's like everyone can be engaged and build a better world, and that's a fabulous thing that we can use to hang a lot on. So in terms of the opportunities, I think are enormous in education. If you think about the last 200 years of education, pretty much all education materials you get are two-dimensional. They come through a book, or they come through a blackboard or a whiteboard. The opportunity of making and of all of these three-dimensional things that we can build and design together, including circuit boards, these multi-dimensional things, those can be fabulous education experiences. And these physical objects can be the Trojan horses by which we can deliver much more engaging science, technology, engineering, math, and art and cultural education. And so I think, specifically with Department of Education and NSF, there's a fabulous opportunity for both of those organizations and then all the school boards across the country to engage with this movement and these passionate people in creating these three-dimensional educational experiences. And it really means that we can create an entire new kind of curriculum materials that will engage a lot more students more broadly. I think that's fantastic. I personally think as wonderful as the maker movement is, we're rebuilding a lot of wheels. And that's not the maker movement's fault. I think there's a great opportunity to open up journal access to a huge body of scientific and engineering knowledge that's really locked behind people call it the paywall of science. So unless you have an academic library account, you can't look at all of the history of all of the mechanical engineering designs and biology, the cutting edge of science and engineering. I think that the capacity of makers to play and engage and contribute at the cutting edge is enormous. And it would be wonderful to get more movements that look like the Public Library of Science, a sort of open journal that's free to the public. And we should have those, something like the Public Library of Engineering equivalent, so that we can have makers working at the cutting edge. I think that would be fabulous. A problem I don't know how to solve, maybe this is a White House level problem, is I think the litigious culture in this country and indeed globally now, where we're scared of being sued for this or that or the other, is a bit of an impediment. So anyone who opens a makerspace has to worry about the liability of their table saw or their bandsaw. And those are non-trivial barriers, and they're expensive barriers, and they can sort of provide psychological barriers to people joining and engaging. So how do we, what I think I've heard ideas bandied around where you should be allowed to get your own passport for danger. So if you want, you wave anyone around to your responsibility for yourself, so that you can engage with these tools. Something like that would be fabulous.
We'd like to have those at Maker Faire.
Yeah, and
Please solve that problem.
there you go. And then maybe, so I think that's a fabulous thing to do. And then one thing that I really personally care about a lot, when we think about how research, cutting edge research is done in this country, we think that it's done in universities and university labs and at national labs and to a lesser extent in corporate labs. Realistically, that model for how the cutting edge research and development in the country happens is really an artifact of post-Second World War and the success of the Manhattan Project. So we then we locked ourselves in, and the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, the DoD, all of the agencies that fund research really find it difficult to fund cutting edge research outside of those institutions. I think at a government level, there's an opportunity to maybe do something as bold as say, let's create a new kind of national lab that is in fact just the distributed lab of all of these makers and their spaces and their hacker spaces and their fab labs and the whole lot. And you would like those very innovative places that can move very quickly to be able to compete for the federal research money on a level playing ground with the MITs, with the Stanfords, with the Parks. And I think if we just made a little bit of ground in helping access to create the new science in some method like that, there we would see a flourishing of innovation in this country.
Great.
Yeah. Could I just second? That's a wonderful idea, Saul. That really is terrific. And on his thing on educational materials, to give you a great example of someone that approached me on a talk, he said he works at a Center for the Blind. And he said, we've never been able to teach chemistry to the blind because they can't see the models. We bought a 3D printer, and we're printing out the models that are in textbooks so that they're tactile. And you just think about that. You would never kind of even, it's not a manufacturing question. It is. Right. And then I've had math professors say, kids have real difficulty understanding, volume, and especially from 3D. From 2D drawings in a page, if we print out 3D models, we can talk about it really in a different way. So
that's great. Sylvia, what do you think are some of the things we could do to get more kids interested in making? If we made you president for a day.
Oh, the legislation she'd write on tree houses. Incredible.
Mandate them.
There would be more opportunities for kids to get into making. So in their community, they have more.
A tech shop for every school.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
I personally believe that I don't think you can mandate making, but you can create an environment that's open enough for people to say, hey, I can walk down here and I can think of something. I could think of something, and I could talk to somebody and work through it, even if I have no idea how to actually make this. The internet provides so many tools to connect us with people who aren't even anywhere near you, to be able to get in contact with people or find out things that are projects that people have done that get you closer to be able to making your dream, your crazy invention that you had on a whim, some idea that you had. We're getting so close to the ability to just do that, and the only thing missing is the physical construction stuff.
Right.
The maker spaces, the hacker spaces, the places that you can go to.
That have the tools and the parts to be able to put something together that you have an idea, or can at least order them and get them through, and then have people there who can tell you more about it. It's
right.
I think just an open environment where people can build things would be better than saying, hey, you need to start making because it's good for you.
Right. Saul, you've thought about what a school would be able to do, even with a relatively low-cost budget of $3,000 or $4,000. Why don't you give our viewers a sense for, what a school or a library or museum could do to get started, even with a relatively low budget?
So we worked and we did some of this work with Dale. What is the minimum lab that gets people started? And 3D printers are great, but they're still fairly slow. So if you've got to serve a lot of people, and if you go to the tech shops of the world, the fab labs of the world, the machines that are getting an enormous amount of use are laser cutters, because they're extremely fast. Lots of people can build things with real materials, and it turns out you can build something that has similar capacity to a laser cutter, that's sort of a computer-controlled X-Acto craft knife. And with a tool like that and a bunch of hand tools, potentially you can get a 3D printer, and for $3,000 to $5,000, have a functioning workshop where you can download 3D files, make them out of real structural materials, and in some cases, for prototyping purposes, one of the best materials is just plain old cardboard. It can be very strong, it's very fast, it's very cheap. And you can have, then you just need one computer to drive that with the CAD tools that, for example, Autodesk is propagating into the wild. And a school, a classroom, a library all of a sudden can share three-dimensional objects that the rest of the world has made and fabricate them on site, and teach, not only what I think is the critical thing to teach all of these new makers, which is essentially just the notion you can use a computer to design a three-dimensional object, and a small robot we call a CNC machine can make that design an actual physical object for you. And exposing as many people in this country to that experience as possible is hugely enabling. And then on top of that, teach people just basic hand tool use so that they can make those computer design and built things even more functional with a little bit of other hand tool work. So I think it's very reasonable to imagine that we could outfit every high school and every middle school. I actually think we should be targeting all the way to every elementary school in this country with a reasonably capable set of tools that can have all of those children working with all of the other children in the country in this sort of manufacturing and design revolution.
Great. Well, I think that would be a fantastic thing for manufacturing and technology companies who are in many times complaining that they can't hire workers with the right type of skills to think about doing, is maybe sponsoring some of these maker spaces and hacker spaces in schools and libraries and museums. Tara, what are your concluding thoughts for the group?
Well, I'm going to give a +1 to Dale, who has mentioned mentorship and apprenticeship. In my day job at the Digital Media Learning Research Hub, we spent over a year now looking at, hey, how do you connect mentors with mentees based on their passionate interests? And, everybody would love to have help from somebody, but it's actually the hard part is keeping the mentors engaged and interested. So, we need to find more mentors out there that are interested in, just helping with a one-off project or something more formal and long-term. And that's where we can go out to the public and private sectors and really, look for folks that maybe aren't identifying themselves as mentors right now. We help them with that, help guide them through how to be a really good mentor. So we really need to see more of that happen. I also want to give a shout out to libraries. I actually get more librarians coming into the maker space trying to figure out how to open a space at their libraries than anyone else. It's really exciting. Same for museums. they're doing, in LA, I'm seeing a lot of this, and I know it's happening around the country, and I really think we should put a lot of focus on that, as I think they're great spaces. I have a lot of teachers that actually come through the makerspace, but they're from private schools as opposed to public. So, I'd like to see us not lose our shop classes.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for me. I wrote about that a while ago, and I'm still I love the work Dale's doing. How do we keep our shop classes and not use them for storage rooms? Also, I really, again, to what Sylvia's doing and with her dad's support, how do we help parents support parents to really, sort of showcase maybe if their kids are interested in the work that they're doing. I meet lots of kids all the time that are doing really interesting projects and they would love to share, and we're seeing more platforms out there that are allowing that to happen, but parents are a little bit nervous. So how do we mentor them and the kids in, this is the internet, this is what happens, how can we support them in feeling comfortable sharing?
Great.
So yeah, I think that those are, things that I think about all the time at the Makerspace and in my day job.
Great. Well, I want to tell you how fun this has been. This has been a blast hanging out with all of you. I've got a couple of action items from this Google Hangout for me to explore. But before we wrap up, Sylvia, it looks like you've been making progress on your project. So why don't you tell us about it?
Over.
Oh, right.
Well,
Yes.
there. We painted the logo.
There you go. There's the spiral version, and then here's the horizontal version we did before. And here is a
Mona Lisa.
picture of the Mona Lisa.
Sylvia, if you want an internship, let me know.
Sylvia wants to go to MIT, so Saul, maybe you can help her with that as well.
It's been big on her list since she was 8, so.
Yeah, but Sylvia, you're going to be a fellow down at the LA Makerspace first, right?
All right. Lots of people vying for your affection. Well, again, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you.
And look forward to continuing the conversation with other Google Hangouts on this and other topics. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.